The saint was dying. His breath had shortened. His bones trembled with every movement. He no longer walked. Only sat. In the chapel's corner. As the light changed above him, no one dared disturb him. He had lived among them for years. Yet remained. Somehow apart. He knew things. Before they happened. He spoke only when it mattered. And when he prayed, even the wind went still. When it became clear his time was near, the brothers prepared. Not with mourning, but reverence. They did not weep. They fasted. They waited. One was chosen to hear his final confession. Not the abbot. Not the oldest monk. Not the priest. A quiet brother. Named Matteo. He had no title. No role. But the saint asked for him. By name. No one questioned it. They simply opened the chapel. Closed the doors behind them. And waited. Only the saint and Brother Matteo remained inside. The candles flickered once. Then burned steady. No voices were heard. No words reached the door. But when it was over, the saint smiled. Once. Then died. And Brother Matteo walked out. Without saying a word. He would never speak again. At first, they thought it was shock. Brother Matteo was quiet by nature. Soft-spoken. Deep-eyed. Gentle with even the most stubborn duties. But after the confession, he spoke nothing. Not at meals. Not in prayer. Not even when addressed. The abbot placed a hand on his shoulder. And Matteo only bowed. Not as a vow. Not as defiance. As if the words were simply no longer there. The saint's body was prepared for burial. They clothed him in white. Placed a wooden cross in his hands. Sang the psalms of departure. But Matteo did not attend. He remained in the chapel. Kneeling. Not weeping. Not praying. Just listening. They brought him bread. He did not eat. They offered him water. He took it. But said no thanks. Only silence. The kind of silence that lives in the spaces between questions. The kind that feels like something is still happening. Just not aloud. The monks grew unsettled. Not because of the death. But because of the stillness that followed. They spoke of the saint's final words. They wondered what confession could seal a man's voice shut. But Matteo gave them nothing. Only presence. Only silence. And that silence began to spread. The chapel had always been quiet. But now, it was too quiet. Even during prayer, the air felt heavy. As if something was listening. More than it should. The candles didn't flicker. They bent. All in the same direction. Even when there was no wind. One brother said he heard two voices in the chapel at night. One soft. And one beneath it. Like something whispering. Through the stone itself. He said he stayed. Only long enough to know that neither voice belonged to Brother Matteo. Matteo was always there. Kneeling. Eyes closed. Silent. The abbot called a fast. He feared spiritual deception. He suspected possession. But no one dared accuse. Not with the saint gone. Not with Matteo's silence. Untouched by pride or fear. There was no rebellion in him. No madness. Just obedience. Without speech. Then the voices returned. Not in the chapel. In the dormitories. One night. A novice sat up in bed. And asked who had entered. But no one had. He described the voice. As clear. And trembling. Like it wanted to speak. But couldn't. And just before it vanished. He said it whispered. You didn't hear what I heard. The next morning. The novice was gone. Before he was known as a saint. He was only Brother Aleron. He arrived without a past. No letters. No birthplace. Only a walking staff. A bound book with no writing. And hands. That trembled when held too long in the light. But miracles followed him. A sick child rose after his touch. A storm broke when he prayed. And once. During a fire in the refectory. The flames curved around his robe. But never touched it. He never spoke of visions. But when he closed his eyes. Others listened. He said very little. But what he said. People remembered. Except for the one thing. No one could ever recall. His confession. Not once. In all his years. Did any monk hear it? It was assumed. He was holy enough. Not to need one. But Brother Matteo had been chosen for a reason. And what he heard that night was not the sin of a man who slipped, but of one who had carried something he could never name. Until the end. The silence Matteo held wasn't fear. It was burden. Not of guilt. But of knowledge. Too sharp to speak without bleeding. And the deeper that silence went, the more the others began to hear what he would not say. At night. In dreams. In prayers. That went unanswered. The room where the saint died was sealed. Not formally. Not with decree. Just, avoided. No one entered. No one cleaned. No one touched the chair. Where his body had gone still. It wasn't out of fear. It was something colder than that. Like reverence. Mixed with unease. The candle beside the chair still burned. Weeks after his death. No one replaced it. No one lit it. It simply never went out. One night. Brother Matteo was found. Standing before that door. His eyes open. His face still. One hand raised. But not touching the handle. The abbot called his name. Matteo didn't move. Only lowered his hand. Turned. And walked away. When they checked the door. They found no lock. But it wouldn't open. Not from the outside. Not from within. 3 nights later. It opened on its own. Not wide. Just enough. For one thing to slide out. The saint's book. The one with no writing. Now open to the center. Still blank. Except for one sentence. Scrawled across the fold. He holds it now. And beneath it, a single fingerprint, pressed in ash. The fingerprint in the book matched no one in the monastery. Too wide for a novice. Too long for the saint. Too sharp for the abbot's aged hands. But the ash held something else. Pressed into the page, just faintly, was a single word. Not Latin. Not Greek. Not Hebrew. It did not match any known language in the monastery's library. But when one of the younger monks traced the word with his finger, he collapsed. No illness. No wound. Just silence. Exactly like Brother Matteo. When he woke, he couldn't remember falling. But he said one thing. Before his voice failed completely. Just 4 words. It wasn't his sin. Then he joined Matteo in silence. The two of them sat side by side in the chapel. Sleepless. Still. Eyes always watching the same corner. Where the saint used to kneel. The abbot grew afraid. Not for his soul. But for the silence. That now seemed contagious. He called for an exorcist. But the church said nothing. The messenger they sent never returned. Only his horse did. Riderless. Tied with a rope. Made of braided rosary beads. The kind they gave to confessors who'd heard too much. It began with the bell. 3 rings. All after midnight. No one had touched the rope. No one had left their cell. But every monk heard it. Even the ones who had gone silent. And for the first time since the saint's death, Brother Matteo stood. He did not speak. But he walked to the chapel. Alone. One by one. The others followed. Not by order. Not by fear. But as if drawn. By memory. By silence. By the thing. None of them had been allowed to say aloud. Inside the chapel. The candle at the altar was already burning. And beside it lay the saint's book. Still open. Still marked with ash. But now there were more fingerprints. More writing. Still in the same unknown language. But spreading across the page. Like fire. Without flame. And then Brother Matteo knelt. The silence broke. Not like a scream. Not like a whisper. But like stone. Cracking underground. Matteo opened his mouth. And every candle in the chapel went out. In the dark. He spoke one word. No one understood it. But every monk fell to their knees. Because somehow they recognized it. And somehow they knew it had never been meant for human ears. When the sun rose, the chapel was empty. No candles. No book. No monks. Only Brother Matteo remained. Still kneeling. Still silent. But changed. His face was calm. His eyes no longer searching. His hands open. And on the floor beside him, not written, but scorched into the stone. It has passed. The monks returned by evening. One by one. Without speaking. None remembered leaving. But each returned. With something missing. A weight. They hadn't known they were carrying. The silence was no longer heavy. It was clean. And Brother Matteo, though still wordless, began to hum. Not loudly. Not often. But only when standing in the place where the saint had died. The saint was never canonized. No records were kept. His name was scrubbed from the books. But the story remained. Not in writing. Not in song. But in the pause between prayers that come too close to something sacred. And those who visit the chapel now say they still hear humming. Only near the altar. Only at night. And only if they carry something that needs to be confessed.